Welcome to the Osprey Podcast. Our first guest is a former Royal Marine Commando sniper turned TV and film adventurer who specialises in extreme, remote and hostile environments. As you can imagine, he's had his fair share of adventures, and I can't really think of many people that would make a better first guest than him. I'm talking, of course, about Aldo Kane. Aldo will be doing a live Q&A with us on Wednesday, 15th of April. So if you find you have any questions for him, then head over to Osprey Europe on Instagram, give us a follow, and he'll be online on Wednesday, ready to give you some answers. I'm your host, Marcus Brown, and this is the Osprey Podcast. Aldo, thanks for coming on, man. How's it going?
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. Strange times, huh?
It is indeed. How are you finding lockdown?
Not too bad. I was doing a job in South Sudan and blissfully unaware of what was unfolding in the UK and around the rest of the world. So we woke up one morning to a phone call saying that we had to get back to the UK. We had about 4 hours to pack down our bush camp and then head out in helicopters and then smaller fixed-wing Cessnas and then onto a bigger plane down to the capital. And then, so it took us about 36 hours to bounce back to the UK. So anyway, I'm here, been back about 2 weeks now and pretty much been locked down since then.
Man, well, I'd like to start just by talking about the film Unseen Enemy that you worked on with Janet Tobias. It was documenting the sort of rise of new viruses that we've been seeing across the world, looking at what the cause might be, looking at some of the effects, told some really genuinely heartbreaking stories. It seems sort of more relevant now than ever. In the first 5 minutes, one of the professors said, if we do nothing, it's not a matter of if there will be a global pandemic, it's a matter of when. Could you tell us a bit about what your role was on that film?
Yeah, that was 6 years ago we filmed that, so 2014. We were filming. So the film, just if anyone hasn't seen it, it's called Unseen Enemy. It's on, I think it's on Amazon. Is that right?
I found it. I couldn't get it on Amazon, but I did find it on Vimeo.
Managed to get it. Yeah. So you can get it. But anyway, Unseen Enemy is about not just Ebola, but lots of different emerging viruses, and how they can turn from patient zero into global pandemics. And it's a pretty terrifying watch, I would say. But 6 years on, and we're sat in the middle. We're all effectively in lockdown because of a global pandemic. So it's more relevant now than it probably ever has been. But the section of the film that I was involved with, Janet Tobias, who was who's the overall director and company owner who made it, is we'd worked on a few films before, and she asked if I could come and look after a film crew that was going into, first of all, the Congo to document how the Ebola virus how it first came into being, and then how it was transmitted, and how that then became endemic in West Africa. So we'd been filming there, I think, in February in 2014. There wasn't an outbreak, if my timings are right. We got back to the UK, then the outbreak started in, I think it was Guinea, and then very quickly it was into Sierra Leone, into Liberia. So as a film crew, small little crew, me, Janet, a director of photography, camera assistant, and the sound lady, we basically re-rolled within 2 or 3 weeks, and then headed straight out to Monrovia in Liberia to document everything to do with how Ebola was taking hold in these countries.
What are some of the practicalities of working, particularly as part of a film crew, amongst a situation like that?
Well, I think, speaking from my experience then, I found it difficult because you're dealing with, as the film title suggests, an unseen enemy or a hidden enemy. My time in the Marines, you're potentially fighting another person. And with any other situation, you can usually see what you're up against. With viruses, that's not the case. So there's a lot of unknown, there's a lot of spin, there's a lot of hearsay, there's lots of non-facts that get peddled about viruses, and in different countries that comes across differently, and it can affect and hamper the relief that's coming in to help these countries. And as you can see here, it pretty much paralyzes the countries that the virus takes hold of, not just individually, but also economically. It can shut countries down, which effectively we're seeing now. But it's hard. We, as a crew, my job is to look after them, to make sure they're safe on the ground. On this particular job in West Africa, I was location producing as well, so I was sorting out a lot of the contacts, the stories, following up on as you saw in the film, some of the harrowing stories there. And we are, as a film crew, operating in some of the most high-risk environments that I've ever operated in. One mistake in the 36 of 40 stages that you have to do to take your PPE off or put it on could...
PPE being personal
protective equipment. So you've got your masks, hood, gloves. And there's a very strict process of how you put that on, how you take it off, how you chlorinate, how you wash, how you spray. And if you get that wrong, then you die. You contract a virus and you can very quickly become ill. And that's exactly what was happening to the doctors and healthcare workers who were working phenomenal amounts of hours, and they're making one mistake, taking the PPE off the wrong way or whatever, and ending up contracting the virus and dying. So from a personal point of view, there was people there risking their lives day in, day out to help serve the people that were dying of the virus. And our job really was there documenting it from the highest levels of government right the way down to the people contracting it on the street and further out of the cities. It was fairly tough time, I would say.
How do you manage fear or anxiety in that sort of environment?
The same way I treated it as I treat everything, and it's the first thing with any anxiety or fear is that rarely people are making decisions based on facts. I guess the thing with fear is and the thing that fuels fear is people's opinions or people's opinions on facts. We read newspapers, scaremongering headlines. We get bombarded now 24 hours a day by continual news about certain subjects, and it's very hard to dig past that and to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual details of, certainly in that outbreak, is how the virus is transmitted. And we were working with some of the best epidemiologists, virologists in the world, and we made our decisions based on their expert advice. And we would only ever film in areas where these guys said, this is how you can remain safe there, this is how you can do it, then we would do that. So dealing with fear is the same as I do with everything, is I get all the facts together without the spin, without the basically, and then I make my decisions based on facts.
So it's quite a logical approach then, basically.
It has to be, because especially in a situation where you cannot see what it is that's the problem, the virus, you have to deal with facts, and you have to crush your anxiety and your fears with knowledge and with facts and speaking to the correct people, experts. People spend their entire life studying one specific strain of virus. If we don't listen to these people, then we're leaving ourselves open to much worse than the situation we're in at the minute.
That's it. I guess there's kind of a lesson in that for all of us at the moment, in that I at least find it very easy to land myself in a rabbit hole of news articles, but I don't know who's written what article. I don't know what their sources are. And especially with social media now, WhatsApp groups that just light up. It's easy to get overwhelmed by it all, I think.
It is. And if, I have to say I'm not an expert in in emerging viruses and
of course,
how
me neither.
But what I can tell you is that my life is much better for not reading that. I'm not bombarding myself with news. I stopped watching news probably 10 years ago.
Really?
I don't have any reminders on my phone set up from any news channels. And so I'll dip into specific areas that I'm interested in, keep a general view, but I don't read newspapers. I don't read or have news on 24/7, because it's the job of these organizations is to continually pour out news and content. And once you end up, the same as in life, once you end up in a wormhole of something, regardless of what it is, you will find the things, you will find the fuel to fuel your fire.
Right, yeah.
So it's I very much now try and just deal with facts, purely facts. Listen to the experts, do what the experts say, deal with facts, and nothing else. God, we got deep straight away.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard not to with a film like that.
Yeah, true.
I think it was Dr. Moses. So was he presumably you were working with him, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he, at one point, he said that the healthcare system there, or at least the unit he was working in, was overwhelmed in 3 days.
That's right.
Which I think just kind of emphasizes the importance of us paying attention to the experts right now.
Yeah, I mean, the experts are the ones. They're ultimately the ones that have everyone's interest, at heart. And it's what else can you do when experts tell you something and we base it on history? I mean, there's 3 or 4 other series out there that have been made over the last 15 years that document pandemics, and all of them say not if but when. It's a simple. It's really a simple equation of lots and lots of people living on top of each other. Global travel now is so prolific. When the first Ebola outbreak happened in 1976, I think it was, if I remember correctly, people weren't traveling back and forward from Kinshasa to Europe to the UK, whereas now, you've seen how quickly this virus has spread from China just within the matter of a month or 2 months. Global travel is so prolific, and it is a disaster waiting to happen, or is happening. But like I say, I'm not an expert on all this.
Yeah, we'll have to remind the audience to take a pinch of salt with everything we say on this.
Yeah.
But they talked about the where the viruses are even coming from in the first place, quite a bit, and essentially, as if we needed another reminder, it came back to global warming, right?
Yeah, like I say, I'm not an expert on this, but from what I can tell, when you speak to various different experts about where these viruses come from, I think there's an underlying situation where you have overpopulation of people that are pushing into areas that didn't necessarily have people living before. So, for example, if I'm cutting a track into the jungle somewhere in the middle of Africa or Southeast Asia, opening it up for illegal logging or extraction of trees or minerals, once I'm then in there, my team of either poachers are in there or even just bona fide proper workmen who are going in there to, put up electricity pylons. Once they're in there and that road is opened up, it then opens up that road for wildlife crime, for poaching, for trafficking. And there is evidence to suggest, even just bushmeat, there's an evidence to suggest that these viruses can and do come from animals that are entering the food chain, which weren't necessarily part of the food chain before. But again, caveat is I'm not an expert on that.
Let's talk about isolation a little bit. You spent, as part of the BBC Horizon episode, you spent 10 days in a bunker underground on your own in the dark with no way of telling the time, no technology. Sounds like the stuff of nightmares. Can you tell us a bit about why were you even doing that in the first place?
Yeah, it was a BBC Horizon experiment on circadian rhythm. You can find it probably on iPlayer. It's called body clock. And effectively what they wanted to do was take me and remove all cues of daylight and human interaction, and I guess put me into, sensory deprivation and see what effect that had on my circadian rhythm. So that was actually the main thrust of the program, was about how my body clock reacted. But interestingly, there was lots of other things that came out of it for me with regards to mental health, well-being, fitness. And I guess, so I was walked inside a nuclear bunker for sort of down the stairs into down, I think, 3 flights of stairs, and then locked in this soundproofed room. I had a bed. It
was soundproofed as well.
Yeah, and I can tell you the noise of silence is deafening. True silence is deafening. I was walked down into, I guess, 3 flights of stairs, locked in a room, and I was in there for 10 days on my own in the dark. No contact with the outside world, no reference to time, so no clocks, no watches, no technology, and obviously no windows and no cues as to daylight.
It seemed like by the end, just that your sleep pattern had completely fallen apart by that stage.
Yeah, and that's basically, from what I can tell, from what the scientists had worked out, is that your circadian rhythm, which is how your body, all your organs and your body as a whole operates when it sleeps, when it's awake. And we tend to think that it's a 24-hour cycle. We've given days 24 hours, but actually our body has a system which is 24 hours and a bit, 25 hours, something. So without any reference to daylight and time, then you free fall. Effectively, you go into this free cycle of circadian rhythm. Again, I'm not a scientist, but what happened is my sleep pattern slipped by around 40 to 50 minutes every night. And so by the end of the 10 days, I was sort of going to bed at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then waking up at however many hours later. The interesting thing is, when you don't have any reference to time or daylight, when you go to bed, you don't know what time it is. And so when you wake up, whether it's 1 hour, 8 hours, or 10 hours later, you have no idea how long you've been asleep. So you don't know. So when they started to mess with waking me up, they had alarms where they could wake me up. And effectively what that did was induce this jet lag phase. And I was doing experiments down there. And what it highlighted is how ineffectual I was at decision-making processes about even just cognition and strength and like grip strength. All of it changed.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. The fact that even your grip strength was dropping.
Yeah, and
just by essentially just messing up your sleep pattern.
Exactly. So what they're trying to say by the end of it is, everyone has an optimum amount of sleep. You have an optimum time to go to the gym, when to relax, when to be productive, and if you're not operating in those boundaries for yourself, then you're fighting yourself. So that was the main thrust of the film, was about the circadian rhythm. But I found, interestingly for myself, much more was from a mental health point of view, that without daylight and human interaction and exercise, it was very easy for me to mentally start to unravel. And I could see that, 10 days I could ride out just about. I'd managed to work out a system on the wall that counted sleep cycles. So every time I fell asleep for something that I felt was longer than the doze, then I would mark that up kind of as a day. If that was an indeterminate time that I'd been sent in there for, I don't think I would have made the 10 days. So I think it highlighted to me the importance of exercise, getting outside, and human interaction. Those 3 things I've been banging on about now since I did that experiment. And, it makes such a difference to get outside and actually have daylight hit your skin. Has a difference on how you sleep and how effective your sleep is at night and general well-being.
I've noticed that over the last few days, actually, because there's been a couple of days where I just actually haven't left the house for any reason.
Yeah.
Now I'm dead addicted to the one exercise a day. Even just walking, like just going outside and getting the air.
Until you've had something taken away from you, you very rarely are aware of how lucky you are to have it. To have daylight removed from you, communications to anyone removed from you, exercise. So now, I'm in lockdown now, I think 14, 15 days. And, I've got a garden that I can go into. I can make coffee anytime. I can train in the garden. I'm out in the daylight. I've got internet. I can Zoom people. I can do work. I can write. So really, it's put it into lockdown into perspective for me. But the other side of that is that there are people out there who live incredibly lonesome lives. That for whatever reason or another can't leave the house, can't get the exercise, can't get daylight, don't talk to people, and so it's I guess it can be tricky. And there are people all over the world that work in isolation and choose to be in isolation. And then there's other people that have ended up in isolation, and that's different. It's a different head game.
That's a big difference.
Huge difference.
I feel like that's relates to all of these kinds of trips in a way, because there's obviously, if you're choosing to go into a bunker for 10 days or to go and work in the middle of an Ebola outbreak, it's one thing when you choose to do it and you're in control of that decision, but when you get dumped in the middle of it,
that's yes, exactly. It's very different whether you choose to do something or whether you've been put in that situation. But there's a school of thought that says, regardless of what situation that you've been put into, right up until the very point that you draw your last breath, you still have control over your mindset, your decision-making process, and what you make of a situation. I've read a little bit of the sort of old Stoics over the years, and they're very much of that mindset that regardless of the situation that happens to you, you can still appreciate what you do have. And yes, we are locked in at the minute, but we do have internet, we do have food, we do have toilet paper. There is no problem with the logistics chain in the UK. It's just people holding stuff. So there's lots, there's lots to be thankful for. Obviously, that's not taking away anything from what's happening now. This is mega serious, and the frontline services that are grafting now are putting themselves right in the line of fire. But for everyone else, you've got you have got time now to get all these bits and bobs done that you've never had time to do before. And it's I guess, we can't be in control of what's happening outside of our house, but you can be in control of, what you're going to do with the time that we've been now given by the government to stay at home.
Pretty sure that's a Gandalf quote. I'm showing my nerd side here, but that's definitely a Gandalf quote.
Is it?
All you have to do is decide what to do with the time that is given to you. Something along those lines.
I've never seen it, but yeah.
Watch it, man. It's outdoor inspiration right there. When you mentioned the front line, actually, it reminded me of a quote I heard recently. Dr. Ed Hope said that people that keep referring to the medical staff as being on the front line, but he doesn't see it that way. He says you're on the front line, everyone's on the front line, and they're on the last line. Yeah.
It's going to be, it's tough times for people, and it's difficult when you can't see what the problem is. And it's beautiful outside today. It's 20 odd degrees. Well, it will be 20 odd degrees this weekend, I think. And it feels like spring has landed, bank holidays, whatever, it's coming up to Easter. It's going to be tough times to be able to stay in, but ultimately that's all we've been asked to do. We've been asked to stay in and reduce contact. We've not been asked to go to war. We've not been asked to put our lives on the line. We've just been asked to stay at home and keep out the way. So I think that's the tough part that people are getting their heads around.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, I mean, the thing with from my very tiny little bit of experience is that these things don't go away quickly. You know, Ebola is now from in 1975 being nothing to now it's completely endemic. You know, it's always going to be there. You know, it's only 30 years or something like that.
Really?
So it's not long.
So they know they're just not going to be able to get rid of it.
They will never get rid of Ebola now, as far as I'm aware. Like I say, I'm not an epidemiologist or virologist, but you know, that's now a virus which affects certain places in the world. So yeah, it's I think it's going to be a big mindset shift, and potentially we're, you know, the entire world has been put on pause. People have been asked to stay at home, and people will reevaluate. There'll be songs written, there'll be books written, there'll be lives changed. You know, there'll be a lot of positive things come out of it. But yes, tough times.
Let's talk about fitness a little bit. You've just launched the Expedition Fit program, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, just give us an overview about your general approach towards fitness.
Basically, I joined the Marines at the age of 16, and I've been fairly active since then, across the board, whether I was in the Marines or when I got outside, and I've been working in the outdoor sort of environment now for the last 20 years. Fitness to me has always been a means to an end. Like, I've had to be fit to do the job, or I get fit from doing the job. It's never been about being cosmetic, about having six packs, or, you know, about massive guns. It's, you know, and I can't get too big. So my fitness, the same as, I mean, I'm no different to anyone else that's sort of in my line of work. I probably just shout quite loudly about it, but you know, mental health and fitness are two things that together, getting outside, currently at the minute we can't, but you know, being outside, being physically fit and mentally fit is like you're giving yourself the best shot at this one tiny little blip on earth that we've got. And so fitness, I guess, to me is about functional fitness. It's about being able to carry my rucksack, to be able to climb, to be able to go into a cave, to swim, to run, jump, fight, whatever I need to do. And so Expedition Fit was really, I just get asked a lot about what fitness programs I do, how I keep fit, how I train, how I maintain. And I'm rarely at home and have a gym with all the stuff. So everything that I do is fairly low kit, so hardly any kit. And it's just volume, and it's usually I can do it anywhere, whether it's in a hotel or out on the ground. When I was in South Sudan there, I set up a little gym, had like a pull-up bar, like a tree to do pull-ups on, the suspension trainer. So it's really Expedition Fit is a program that's basically calisthenics, mobility, and CV running. And it's like an 8-week program, but it's based on exactly what I do for training.
Okay, so if you were to, let's say you had only three exercises that you have to stick with till the end, what do you think they'd be? Where would you
if we're talking no kit?
No kit, and you've just got 3 exercises till death.
Till death. I mean, but I've been some places where you have no pull-up bar. One of my favorite exercises is pull-ups, just because it just uses so many different muscles. But if you don't have any kit, then always burpees. Like if you've got space to stand up and lie down, then you can do 100 burpees every day, and you'll be fit by the end of that trip, whatever it is that you're doing. They're not that pleasant to be doing, but burpees, press-ups, and squats for me are probably 3 of the biggest exercises, and you can do that in your bathroom.
Sure, and it's easy enough to add weight if you do want to as well, right?
Yeah, so most of the stuff.
Get creative with it, but
yeah, exactly. But most of the exercise that I do is body weight stuff. It's calisthenics and mobility, right. and I'm 42 now, so I'm having to do a lot more of the mobility and stretching than I used to do when I was younger. Stay on top of it.
I watched a video of you doing the 3 peaks last year, was it?
Yes, just in September, yeah.
I found it really interesting how you'd done, so to give it some context, you did the 3 peaks, but you also rode a bike between, right? So usually people would get a lift.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I wasn't making a big deal about how hard it was. It was actually just like a challenge I'd set myself, really. I wanted to do the 3 peaks because, I mean, it really to remind myself. I spend so much time traveling abroad, but to remind myself how beautiful the UK is. And Ben Nevis, Scafell Pike and Snowdon, it's a beautiful drive between them all, or a ride between them all, and it's amazing running up and down them. So really, it was a personal thing. That was all. I've got a big BMW GS adventure bike, and I thought it'd be amazing to be self-sufficient, run up Ben Nevis, run down, get on the motorbike, ride down to Scafell Pike, run up Scafell Pike, down, motorbike down to Wales, run up Snowdon. I have to say I didn't do any training beforehand. I just cracked on with it. I had a knee injury after the first hill, and then you just get on the motorbike and you just seize up on it. And then, so I did it in about 23 hours. Actually, the motorbike was the hardest part of the whole thing. Riding, it was raining, it was wet, it was miserable, cold. And actually, when you're sort of, filtering and you just have to be very aware of what you're doing and fully on it. So I found the motorbike riding part of it particularly difficult. But it was just a nice way of seeing the 3 peaks. I'd never done it before continuously, and it was a bit of a challenge.
So on the Snowdon climb, you had a guy called Lex Fitness with you. Really funny dude on YouTube. Check him out if you're looking for a laugh. And he uploaded his own video. Bearing in mind, you've already done 2 of the mountains. You've ridden the distance between. You've done all of the riding you're going to do at this point. You've injured your knee, and he was really struggling to keep up, and basically just had to let you go.
Yeah.
And then at one point his leg went in like full cramp, and at that point he just went, "Guys, I've just realised that gym muscle is useless."
Yeah.
And of course that's not entirely true, but he was making a point that sort of harkens to a whole philosophy.
Yeah, well, I mean, Lex is the top dude. It was funny, actually. I needed it by the time I got to Snowdon. I was a pretty dark place by then. So he was like G'ing up the old spirits. But yeah, he said himself as well, there's a big difference between looking good and then being able to function. And it depends what you want. The majority of people don't need to be able to run up and down 3 or 4 mountains.
Right. It's just about knowing what your goal is and knowing how to achieve that, right?
Exactly. Like if you want to be good at running, run. If you want to be big and strong looking, then do big strength exercises. If you want to be functionally fit, do body weight exercises. I think the key is to know what it is that you want to do. And, ultimately for me, carrying excess bulk and muscle is fairly useless. If I'm climbing up a rope somewhere and I've got an extra 8 kilos of weight on me just because I've been smashing the deadlifts and the bench press for the last 2 months, then I'm going to have issues. So, but it's the 3 peaks was, I loved it. I would definitely suggest anyone to get out and do it. The UK, man, is going to be like home for the next few months, if not 6 months. There's going to be fairly hefty restrictions on international travel. So I would definitely say once this is over and people can get out and about, is get up into the hills in the UK. 3 peaks is a great way of doing it.
To be honest, the more I've travelled outside the UK, on Osprey shoots or just general trips for whatever.
Yeah.
The more I've done that, the more I've realised how good we have got it. And that's not to, paint a bad light on any of those other places, but some of the landscapes here are unreal.
Yeah, I was when I jumped on the motorbike just after coming off Ben Nevis, and I have to say that A82, I think it is.
Yeah.
It goes through Fort William and down through Glencoe and down side of Loch Lomond, down to Glasgow. That is one of my favourite roads in the world, I would say. But to do that on a motorbike, just like traveling along, and it's stunning. So yeah, we are pretty lucky, and that was, it was a good reminder to me, really, that what we've got on the doorstep here.
For sure. We actually shot the Archeon series. We shot our main hero images on that road, or not on the road. Not on the road, on the mountain.
Up in Glencoe.
Yeah.
It's what a beautiful place.
What are some of the most common mistakes that you see if you're trying to achieve functionality? What are some of the common mistakes you see people making?
For me, I'm not a PT, or everything that I do is because it works for me. But my biggest issues that I'm seeing now is mobility and stretching more than anything else. So if I've basically been doing years of smashing around up in the hills and the mountains, climbing, yomping, never stretching, never doing mobility, and I'm suffering from it now. Actually, this isolation has been good because I've had nothing else to do. I'm working through. There's a book called How to Become a Supple Leopard by
no.
Star. And I've just been grinding through like all my injuries, and I've got 2 lacrosse balls and some of the bands and things, and I'm just basically grinding through my injuries and improving mobility. And today I went for a run, and close to 9 miles, and I didn't have any pain in my lower legs for the first time in, honestly, years. So and I think that's down to basically working on mobility. And for me, that's the biggest setback for functionality in the field is pain or through lack of mobility.
I've heard you talk a number of times about there's one particular phrase that really grabbed me, which was cheerfulness in the face of adversity, which that's like part of the Marines. I don't know what it is.
They call it Commando Spirit.
Commando Spirit.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. I've heard you say it. I've heard Foxy say it a couple of times. It resonated with me especially because of one specific thing, which is that I'm what you would call an exceedingly average surfer. Very, very intermediate, middle of the road, entirely unremarkable. But I've been in big enough surf to get really scared. Yeah. And when that wave is coming towards you, and it's way bigger than anything you've seen before, and you've got to roll your board and get underneath. There were time and time again where that would happen, and I'd basically just brick it and either throw my board, which is pretty much the worst thing you can do, or just generally panic. And then there was one occasion where I was in with a mate, and exactly that situation was happening, and I just looked over to him, and both of us just started laughing. I'm confident that even now that is still the quickest that I've ever gone under and come back up.
I think it's that laughing is also nerves. That happens in lots of situations where you think these people shouldn't be laughing, and actually it's directly down to
it's just the stress response.
Nervous. Right? It's a stress response. It's a nervous. The same as yawning. As well, yawning, laughing. It's a way of displacing stress. But yeah, cheerfulness in the face of adversity is the Commando Spirit, which I bang on about all the time, is courage, determination, unselfishness, cheerfulness in the face of adversity. And it's those 4 pillars that underpin, it underpins lots of things that I do. And again, like Foxy or Nims or any of the other guys that that you guys know, and it's that cheerfulness in the face of adversity, or gallows humor, is like you're there anyway. You may as well enjoy the process, whatever that is and however bad it is. And I will say you've got like type 1 fun, we know, is stuff that's fun to do at the time and fun when you look back. Type 2 fun, where it's not fun when you're doing it, but it's fun when you look back. And that's, cheerfulness and adversity is kind of like that. Oh, there's type 3 fun.
What's type 3?
Type 3 is not fun when it's happening, and it's not fun when you look back on it. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to attitude and what your attitude is at the time. And, tough times, tough situations, you're not judged on whether you get through it or not. You get judged on how you got through it. And cheerfulness in the face of adversity for me is, it's quite a big one. lots of people have got through lots of tough times, but if you're the guy that's screaming at someone or dropping the C-bomb at them when they just need a little bit of help, then, or a bit of cheering up, then, you know, that you'll be judged on that.
You talk a lot about the kind of iron will that you built up in the Marines. How do you start building that? Where if you're not in the Marines, if you're not in the military in any way, how do you start working on that yourself?
Do you know what? I don't have all the answers there, but if we're talking about mental and physical or emotional resilience, to use a well-coined word, but that resilience or that iron will, like you say, if I was to come up with a training program to make people feel better about shit times in their life or getting through hard times, it would be getting them out into the elements in a controlled environment, outside, up on a mountain, in winter, cold, wet. I don't mean beasting them like thrashing them up and down the side of a hill. I just mean, let's say, for example, you and I went out once a month or a couple of times a month through the entire year. Out of those 12 or 24 times up in the hills, navigating, camping out, being cold, being wet, being a little bit scared, all of that builds this, I guess, resilience. Confidence is another way of looking at it, is personal confidence in your abilities and courage in your convictions. It builds it, and it builds on that experience. I think then when you get to tough times in your life, I don't know, a relationship breakup or a death in the family, or financial troubles,
global pandemic.
yeah, or a global pandemic, then although not necessarily directly, you would think, transferable from being on the hill to everyday life, they're very transferable. The skills and the confidence and your courage and your own convictions that comes from decision making, in these fairly tough environments, directly helps you with the rest of life. And it might be as simple as, well, I got through that 3 days up in the Brecons with my mates, and it was cold and it was wet, I can get through this. And I think, if we were breaking it all down into something that was easy to tell someone, I'd say that's probably what it was. The more time you spend in hardship, in hard environments, then the easier the rest of normal life becomes.
So it's kind of what we touched on earlier, where you're choosing to put yourself in situations of discomfort in order to build up a resilience to those situations, right? So, yeah, then when you are thrown into it without having made the decision to go there, then you're a little more prepared.
There's loads of people doing sort of cold water training now. The studies say it's good for your mental health, but the process of putting yourself in discomfort for a certain amount of time, it's good for you physically, but also mentally, it teaches you a bit of resilience, a bit of coping strategies. And I don't have all the answers on that, but I'd certainly say that discomfort in environments, and I certainly don't choose it all the time, it's just the nature of my work, is that it's hard graft, you're carrying things, or you're being denied things like water. If you've ever been in a situation where you haven't had water for the best part of a day and you don't know when you're going to get it again, guarantee you'll never ever look at the tap in the same way in your house. So there's I guess all the stuff that you do outdoors basically is what I'm saying. Outdoors to me builds the resilience to be able to deal with and cope with normal everyday life.
So just get outside, basically. That's what
the government guidelines. Yeah, I would say get outside. Spend the most amount of your time in the day outside as you can. And I think that might be, that might be one thing that people start to appreciate more. I think the big national parks in the UK, like Snowdon, have seen the most amount of people ever on record going outside for walks. So ordinarily, that's bloody amazing news. Obviously, it's bad because we're in the middle of this epidemic or pandemic at the minute. So not necessarily great, but I think it may have, by having that taken away, that freedom of movement taken away.
It's making people realise.
It's making people realise, that getting outside is so good for so many different reasons.
One of the quotes in the 3 Ps video that really jumped out at me was when you said being an adventurer isn't just about exploring places and going new places. It's about stretching yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally. I think that wraps up nicely sort of everything we're talking about here, I think.
Yeah, and that on the Three Peaks, certainly, it's certainly, there's been thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have been doing that, but I hadn't ever done that. So for me, that was a new adventure. Of all the things I've done around the world, I was still able to test my physical, my mental and emotional resolve and test the mettle of Aldo Kane on a very familiar UK circuit, which is done every year by thousands of people. So, it's an ideal testing ground.
What's up for you next? Once we are all free again, or slightly freer, perhaps.
Yeah, so I don't know what's next. My industry has just been turned on its head, the same as everyone else. I had work planned for the next 6 months, fairly back to back. And as a freelancer, that's unheard of. But that's all gone. It's completely evaporated. I don't think postponed. I think even cancelled. So Who knows? I need to look at the opportunities and see what I can do. And same as everyone else is just dig in, listen to the advice about what we actually have to do physically, within our houses. But then, for me, I need to start thinking about what else do you do to earn money? What work is there? What work will there be after this? But as with all, I guess, all hard times, there's going to be opportunity.
It's interesting seeing everyone adapting and trying to just pave a way through completely uncharted territory for a lot of them, like the talk show hosts, especially. Watching them essentially trying to become YouTubers now is really, really interesting to see. I
mean, it's shaking up our industry and lots of other industries, and people will realize they've been doing something the wrong way for the last 10 years. Change, it's going to create lots of change, and it's going to be interesting times.
Before we go, we are running out of time, but before we go, I'd like to get from you. We don't have a title for this segment, but we're working on it. So if you have any ideas at home, send them in. We need a nice title that sums up your lockdown listen, perhaps lockdown listen. So one song, one TV show or film, and one other, which is up to you. So it could be a podcast, it could be an app, it could be a book. What would you go for your recommendation whilst in lockdown?
Right. So my lockdown book would be Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Do you know that? Have you heard of it?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
It's an amazing, a really amazing book written by Marcus Aurelius, who was a general in the Roman Empire 2,000 odd years ago. And the 10 lessons in there are as relevant today as they ever were. And true words of wisdom there. Basically, he's an ancient Stoic and takes a lot of his teachings from Seneca, Epictetus. So I would say my book would be Marcus Aurelius Meditations. Right, music, I'm going to go for Frank Turner, and that is, what's it going to be? The Next Storm. Frank Turner, The Next Storm. I like Frank Turner, so it could have been any one of his tunes.
Okay, any Frank Turner we'll just go with.
Yeah, exactly. And then what was the last one?
What do we have? We've had book, film, TV. Oh no, song. So film, TV.
Film and TV. Can we tout our own ones?
You absolutely can. I should have mentioned already that you can catch tigers hunting the traffickers. Yep. On BBC iPlayer at the moment if you're in the UK.
Yeah. Tiger King that's on
Netflix, of course, yeah.
At the minute is great. But Tigers, when it went out on BBC, was around about the same time as the virus was breaking. So I think it kind of it didn't not as many people saw it as I think should have seen it. So you can still see Tigers hunting the traffickers on BBC iPlayer, but I think you have to search Natural World Tigers hunting the traffickers on BBC iPlayer, and then you'll get that.
I can tell you, actually, just typing in your name is enough. on iPlayer. Just type in Aldo Kane and it comes up. Yeah.
Okay, good. Cool.
We might as well talk about that very quickly just before we finish. What were your expectations going into it, but then what were your main takeaways afterwards?
So Tigers Hunting the Traffickers was really an investigation, a live investigation into the illegal twofold, the illegal tiger trade in Southeast Asia and how that's then having an effect on wild tigers in Southeast Asia and tiger range countries. So effectively you have in Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, China, you have tiger farms where they can have up to 200 tigers in captivity, and a lot of them are being bred either for tourism, tiger petting, or into the tiger trade. In Vietnam, tigers are killed, they're either drowned or electrocuted, they're then butchered, their bones are boiled down into make it like a glue. And in China, they're made into wine, so the carcasses are hung up in vats of wine. So these are luxury products which are now going out across Southeast Asia, and that demand for those luxury products is having a direct effect on wild tiger populations. So we are, at a tipping point where in the next 10 years we could lose all wild tigers off the face of the earth. Probably not even 10 years. So it was an investigation into tiger farms and illegal poaching.
Without wanting to move into spoiler territory, which, to be fair, I don't think you can spoil a show like that because some of the footage is so visceral. The moment with the freezer rather, what was kind of going through your head? Because that's a real heavy moment.
We sort of all know what's going on out there, and I've been out there investigating it for a while, but to actually see the evidence in the freezers was and completely open to the public. I just effectively just got out the car and walked over and opened the freezer.
It's actually it's incredibly tense, but it's almost a little bit humorous when you're like just kind of standing around going, don't look at me. And you can see there's guards on the premises.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that all of these places they don't really see that they're doing anything wrong. So I suppose in their eyes they don't have to hide too much, and they are open to tourism, although there's not very many tourists go there. But ultimately, the owner of that tiger zoo was then found 3 weeks later in Hanoi with 7 tiger cubs in his in a freezer. So it's the evidence actually. We wouldn't have been able to do any of that filming had it not been for the NGOs that we're working with, like the Environmental Investigation Agency, EIA, and they've got a whole section on their website now that's off the back of the film. It's an information pack almost that people, if they want to know what they can do to help the illegal trade in tigers and wildlife crime generally, then they've got a section on the website dedicated to that. It's well worth a look.
Well, there you have it, the first episode of the Osprey Podcast. Big thanks to Aldo for coming on, and of course to you for listening. Do remember, Aldo will be doing a live Q&A with us on April the 15th at 12:30 UK time on the Osprey Europe Instagram account. Plus, there'll be a whole bunch of other content on there to keep you entertained, including workouts, competitions, and plenty more. And I really do recommend you check out Tigers Hunting the Traffickers on iPlayer as well. I think there were some really valuable takeaways from this conversation for all of us at the moment. So I'd like to encourage you, focus on your commando spirits, that cheerfulness in the face of adversity. Because as hard as this will be, we will defeat it by staying positive and looking out for one another. Stay home, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Osprey Podcast.